Hi, Charmaine. I have a question
Brad.
for you.
Great.
Brad Hunter, family mediator, collaborative lawyer from Regina, and I'm talking with Charmaine Panko, family mediator and collaborative lawyer from Saskatoon. One question that comes up often is, do I have to pay child support? Or if a couple comes and says, no, I don't care. Um, I don't want any child support from my ex for the children. Can you do that?
Mm. Well, I always say to people, there are no child support police. So nobody comes around and checks in to say, hey, are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? But as from the legal perspective, our courts have said child support is the right of the child. So it's something for parents to really be thinking about if they're negotiating and trying to consider, that they don't want to pay child support or they think they don't need child support, just to look at it a bit differently and say, okay, well, if that's the right of the child, is it really appropriate for us to negotiate that away, or just for me to unilaterally say, no, 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 I don't want it? And but there are creative ways to talk about this issue. I'm curious, Brad, if you ever run into that situation in some of your files.
Well, what I tell people is, first of all, if their incomes are relatively close, often the level of child support is quite small. And in
Nominal.
those
Mhm.
situations, people can waive what the support is, or they can come up with an agreement about how they'll share some major expenses and make sure those are all covered. And some people even get right down to doing clothing and other things that they'll share. But if they're close, that's they often can agree that there is no support. However, if there is a gap, and even if it's $200 a month, I often say, listen, it's better that you pay that. The other thing is that a judge simply won't let the divorce go through if they're married
Right?
if there's not adequate support. A judge has a legal duty. You're right. It's the right of the child, not the parent. And the other thing that will happen is if, let's say, you're the person who's supposed to pay support and your other parent says doesn't take it, or you're really happy, well, they can change their mind 2 years later and say, listen, I want back pay for the last 2 years and I want ongoing
Yes.
support. And quite frankly, they'll get it. You just
Hmm.
can't not deal with your financial responsibility to your children. Um, when they reach university age, it's a little different. You do some different calculations, but while they're growing up, you're expected to share the costs. And it's based on your income. It's based on your standard of living. It's pretty simple to figure out. And the system's designed to kind of get the two households closer in terms of standards of living. And there are some really unique circumstances where support doesn't need to be paid, but those are very unusual that I've only seen that one or two times that they've ever happened in my career. So yeah, and so there are ways to get around it, but it often isn't worth it, or it doesn't really end it.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
and I mean, certainly have seen where people sometimes will say, "Hey, you know what? I'll take on all the debt, and I'll be paying my support in that way." But we've seen sometimes that when the court revisits that because the person who is supposed to be receiving support, like you say, has changed their mind, they go to court and say, "Hey, I want back pay." That the courts will sometimes look at that arrangement that and say, "Well, we're not satisfied that that was in lieu of child support." So you are absolutely right. Huge risk if you enter into that type of an agreement.
and the other thing is child support goes on for 15 years or 16 years, if 18 years if the kids are young, and even after that in university. So you can't predict the future. And the support in theory can get adjusted every year. So it's not based on your income the day you separate from your spouse. It's based on your income as it changes over the years. And most people's income go up. And you're changing child needs because kids, especially around extracurricular activities and all that, the costs go up as they get older. So it's not stable, and it's always subject to the review. And it's the right of the child, not the right of the parents. The parents can't bargain it away, even if they want to. I have done cases though where the one party takes on some extra debt, and or here's a better example: the one spouse owes the other, let's say $20,000. Let's say the spouse who has the children in his or her care owes the spouse who doesn't have the children or isn't going to be paying, let's put it that way, $20,000. Often we'll say, okay, party A owes $500 a month to party B support. party B owes $20,000 to party A for property division, and then we just set off the $500 payment until it's all done. So then in that case, it would be like 40 months. So I have done it that way, where the spouse who is going to get support owes money to the other spouse on property. So we do a set off and they don't actually exchange any money, but support's being paid by reduction of the debt.
And the key here is that how you document that and utilizing the right language. Everybody's situation is unique on its facts. So people should be sure to get independent legal advice, especially if they're thinking about entering into some kind of unique arrangement like that, so they fully understand their obligations.
And can I also point out, Charmaine, that you can enter into those types of agreements. You won't get that kind of order from a judge because a judge isn't in a position to do that. A judge will order support. They have their hands tied. They're not in a position to be creative. So those types of agreements need to happen by agreement. They won't be put in place by a judge. It's an advantage of settling your own case because you can tailor it to your individual financial needs. Charmaine, thanks very much. Any last comments?
No, I just think that, these topics are so, like, it's wonderful to talk about them. And it's also wonderful to work together to help families come up with the unique arrangements that they might want to put in place that, like you say, they'd never be able to get in place from a court's decision.
You'll find a link to Charmaine's contact information and to me in the information below. Thanks very much for your attention.